We are live from Locked On SEC. This is a Locked On College Football Rankings reaction show, of course, brought to you by our friends at Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com today to take advantage of 50% off site-wide by shopping the Friends and Family Sale. Go to omahasteaks.com and use promo code LOCKEDON, one word, at checkout to get $30 off your order. Minimum order may be required. I'm Zach Blackerby, host of Locked On Auburn. We will not be talking about Auburn today, though. But the guys that we will be talking about, teams they cover: Stephen Willis, host of Locked On Ole Miss; Luke Robinson, host of Locked On Bama; Eric Kane, host of Locked On Vols; and Jay Stevens, host of Locked On Buckeyes. Spencer McLaughlin, host of Locked On Ducks, will be joining us in a little bit. Eric, let's start with you. Should Tennessee be the number one team in college football after tonight?
Yeah, it should be. Tennessee's got the best resume. It's got the toughest strength of schedule, of course, at 19. It's got 5 ranked wins on the season. So it's all about the value of the beholder, right? Of the committee members, that they're saying, if they're voting on resume and what's happened so far, I think it's no dispute Tennessee has got the best one. Now, if you're voting on who you think the best college football team is, then that's another conversation. And luckily for Tennessee, you'll have a chance to play Georgia this weekend and get to duke it out there. So, you know, in my perspective, in terms of resume, absolutely Tennessee should be ranked number one. Will it be ranked number one? We'll find out. But again, you can battle out Saturday to see who exactly is number one between at least Tennessee and Georgia.
Yeah, Luke, you got to see this team up close and personal with one of the best college football games I've ever seen between Tennessee and Alabama. And you're familiar with covering the best team in college football on a year-to-year basis. Does this Tennessee team have it?
Look, I think Eric's right. I don't know that they are the team that should be the favorite to win the national championship. But if I'm voting them number one. I think they have the best resume. I think it's also not been done with smoke and mirrors for the most part. They went on the road and dominated LSU. Now, granted, it was an 11 o'clock LSU game, and we all know that plays a little different in the morning than at night. But they still did it. They beat Alabama. They took care of Florida. Now, Florida's fallen off a little bit, but at the time, Florida was pretty doggone good. I feel like they should be number one based on resume. But look, there are going to be some people out there who are like, hey, Georgia hadn't lost since they won the championship. They should still be number one. There are going to be some people that say, hey, Ohio State looks the most explosive of any team in the country. They should be number one. But I'm going year to year with this, almost week to week. And if I'm doing that, I'm voting Tennessee number one.
Yeah. Jay Stevens, what about your Buckeyes and all of this? What are you expecting from Ohio State tonight?
I'm expecting them to fall in the number 2 spot. Eric and Luke said it very, very well. Resume-based, and having the 5 ranked wins, that does speak volumes, not just to the resume, but what they have done against the opponents, the good opponents that they have played. They have handled them and won those matchups. And so I would say, I have no problem saying I do think Tennessee will be number one. If you go to the eye test, it does get a little bit more tricky, but we know how the committee is going to use a resume to try to filter in those top spots in their top 25.
Right. Stephen, Ole Miss, kind of an interesting role in all of this. You guys get the opportunity to play spoiler, and if the next 2 weeks go your way, you're in this thing.
Yeah, if Ole Miss can make it through and get an Alabama team that beats LSU, there's some things that has to go their way. But at the end of the Ole Miss-Alabama game, it could be a situation where Ole Miss needs to only win one of their last 2 to go to Atlanta if Arkansas gets LSU as well. So there's so much that could really happen. It's going to be a lot of fun. I know right now we're basically at the mercy of several other teams, and there's really good teams in this. But, I mean, there's hope, right? And that's what college football is all about.
No question about it. All right, Spencer McLaughlin, host of Locked On Ducks, the man that is incredible with technology. He is here with us now. Oregon kind of in a similar boat, right? Tripped up against Georgia early, but could be the best team in the Pac-12. It'll be fun to see where the committee has the Ducks tonight.
Yeah, just for your personal enjoyment, Zach, the audio issue for hearing you guys I was having a moment ago, I'd literally just pressed the mute button on my laptop. It took me about 3 minutes to figure that out, which is...
The amount of calls you give me with the most simple problems, it's amazing.
It really is. I can't believe this network still employs me. I'm forever grateful.
Yeah, you've got 2 shows somehow.
I know. It's a miracle.
Well.
It is a double miracle. I appreciate you putting that Georgia game as getting tripped up, because that's about the politest description you could possibly have of that week 1 drubbing that the Ducks got from the Bulldogs. But I think the advantage for Oregon, not just this rankings reveal that we're going to see tonight, but going forward as well. Like they can get into the college football playoff. They need some help, but the advantage they've got is, I think what we've seen from the committee over the years consistently is recency bias is a real thing. They will judge you more about how you played the final month of the year than they will the first month of the year, and they will forgive that. Now, 49-3 is ugly, and it will still be a knock against them probably tonight and going forward, but it's not an impossible situation to overcome, because if they continue to just put up 40-plus points and win comfortably week in and week out, and they beat Utah and Washington and Oregon State after they beat Colorado this week, and then win the Pac-12 championship game, if they do all that, it'll be hard to keep them out. And, it's easy to say, well, they lost 49-3. They can't get in. Historically, the number of times a one-loss conference champion has not been in the conversation. Sure, they haven't had a 46-point loss on the resume, but you get help in college football. That's the way this usually goes. Oregon would need a lot of help, but help is usually provided to those who hold serve and just keep winning, because upsets are always abundant in this beautiful, beautiful sport.
Well, Jay Stevens, we've seen that with Ohio State, right? I mean, we've seen that at times where, maybe they play a weird game in Iowa and they kind of trip themselves up. But if you win late, the committee rewards you.
They do reward you. And I do believe that all the coaches that we're speaking of that are coaching these schools, they all know that. You have to dominate and handle things and just win late in November. Of course, there's going to be some rivalry games in there that add some weight to the win. And so, yes, winning in November is big. Ohio State knows that, but all these schools know that. And as Georgia, Tennessee come up and play very soon, and all the other big matchups in this month, everyone knows if you win in this group, you still have a shot to make the Final Four.
All right, we've got our first 5 at 25, UCF. At 24, the Texas Longhorns. At 23, Oregon State. 22, NC State. And at 21, Wake Forest. Some ACC flair, Stephen. Any of these teams stand out to you where they're at?
UCF making it into the list. That is interesting. Also, Oregon State getting some love in the top 25. That's kind of a surprise, I think.
This isn't baseball. What's going on there? What's going on there?
Would you like some insight on why Oregon State is there? Because I can tell you, I liked them before the season.
Yeah.
Steve, I thought they'd be an 8 or 9 win team, and their over-under coming into 2022 was just 5.5. And I said, That is way, way too low. They're already over that number. And I tell you what, we'll learn a lot about the Beavers, because they've had a couple games they've escaped. Game-winning touchdown as time expired against Fresno State on the road early in the year, and then a last-second touchdown by miracle fashion against Stanford on the road. But they've won when they've needed to. They've done it without their starting quarterback, who they might be without again this Friday night in Seattle. Biggest game for Oregon State in about a decade, playing at Washington.
All right, let's go through the next part of this top 25, the first quarter of the top 20 here. Syracuse at 20, a big surprise team throughout college football. Tulane at 19, Oklahoma State at 18, UNC at 17, and Illinois at 16. Luke Robinson, any of these 5 teams stick out to you?
God, how about Illinois, man? What a cool story. I mean, Brett Bielema just got beat up at Arkansas, and he's in the perfect spot. If there's anybody who looks like he'd be sitting at a table going "Da Bears," it's Brett Bielema, and it's just perfect. And he's just doing a masterful job over there. And I think what he said is, look, we're not going to have this slinging around, have fun offense. We're going to bore you to death and be 7-1, and God bless them, they're doing it.
Yeah, that's Brett Bielema in a nutshell. Bore you to death. All right, 15, Penn State, 14, Utah, another Pac-12 team for you there, Spencer. 13, Kansas State, 12, UCLA, and 11, the Ole Miss Rebels. Steven, give us your reaction with where your Ole Miss team is.
That's about where they landed in the coaches poll. I mean, basically, obviously what's happened, they haven't shown LSU yet, but obviously LSU is getting the benefit of the doubt here, and that's probably the reason Ole Miss is in the top 10 team, but that'll be rectified talking about Spencer and college football providing help, Alabama and LSU this weekend. So it kind of doesn't matter if Ole Miss is 11 right now.
Yeah, Spencer, we mentioned a few Pac-12 teams there. That's surprising to you at all?
No, not at all. And Utah, correct me if I'm wrong, is, other than Kansas State, the highest ranked 2-loss team in the country at the moment. I think they're the best 2-loss team in the country, because it would be a much different conversation. Utah would be squarely in the playoff mix if literally one play goes a different direction. And that was one of two plays: a Cam Rising interception in the end zone, or the Utes getting stuffed on a sequence down inside the 5. They have 2 drives go inside the 5, and they walk away with 0 points and lose that game at Florida. But they were the better team that day. But unfortunately, it's a results-oriented business. You have to be able to win. They did not. UCLA, you said, was at number 11, right?
That's right. No, 12. UCLA is at 12.
UCLA at 12. I think that's an appropriate place for them to be, a weak non-conference. But since Pac-12 play has begun, they have been really good. And I know people might look at the 15-point loss to Oregon, where they trailed by 18 at the half. That game was on the road. Ducks have been really good inside Autzen Stadium, really for my entire life. And there was a sequence in that game where the Ducks get an onside kick after they get a touchdown. They don't recover that. It's a completely different ball game.
Right. All right, we're inside the top 10 now. LSU at 10. Boy, what a surprise that is. We'll circle back to them in just a moment. At 9, USC. At 8, the Oregon Ducks at 7-1. And then TCU finding themselves all the way up to 7. I think that's a bit of a surprise as well. Steven, let's talk about these LSU Tigers coming in at number 10. If you would have told me this 3 or 4 weeks into the season, I would have thought you were crazy.
Yeah, it kind of doing head-to-head with Ole Miss in that situation. They just wanted to put them ahead of Ole Miss, and they deserve to be there. And LSU has come so far since the beginning of the year. Brian Kelly's just a heck of a football coach. The guy just figures stuff out, and they've gotten better and improved each and every week. And the Tennessee game happened, but that was a little bit of a mirage. Against Ole Miss, they kind of started to put it together. Against Auburn, they started to put it together in the second half.
Yeah.
And this could be a dangerous team moving forward. And this Alabama game this weekend, this could be interesting.
Yeah. Spencer, we'll circle back to your Oregon Ducks in just a moment, but Jay Stevens, we're about to get the top 6. You still thinking Ohio State number 2? Do you think that's right?
Yeah, that hasn't changed at all after sitting here and listening to everyone and looking at the rankings as they come out. Number 2, I think, is the spot. I would be shocked if they're 3. I'd even be shocked if they're 1. And I think the eye test gives the Buckeyes a shot to be number 1, but no, I think they're solid at number 2.
All right, just revealed Alabama is at 6. Luke Robinson, host of Locked On Bama. Too high, too low, just right?
I mean, frankly, I think it's probably just about right. Personally, okay. I would probably put TCU there, even though I'm an Alabama homer, simply because they are undefeated and TCU's resume isn't bad. But I get it. I think if Alabama and TCU play, I think Alabama wins. I think everybody probably feels that, and they get the benefit of the doubt because they've been so good these last 15 years. I get it. I don't think it matters. If there's an uproar about it, it's really kind of dumb. It doesn't make any sense because it's all going to play out. But the weirdest thing to me is LSU one notch above Ole Miss. I know about the head-to-head, but Ole Miss only has 1 loss. I would flip-flop those two, but as an Alabama fan looking forward to the weekend game against LSU, I'm happy about it because it makes it a top 10 matchup.
Yeah, it makes it a quality win for whoever comes out of that one. Jay Stevens, back to you. You know this team well. The Michigan Wolverines are number 5, just on the outside looking in. Your thoughts?
So some of you guys watching me have seen my face in more shock when I saw this on my television screen. I'm happy inside. Don't get me wrong. They're the Wolverines, not saying their name on the show for numerous reasons. But I do think Harbaugh, the athletic department, hurt themselves this year with their abnormally weak non-conference schedule. And they only have, I do believe, 1 ranked win on the season. That was against Penn State, a blowout win, 400-plus yards on the ground, destroying the Penn State and Nittany Lions in that way. But you schedule a weak non-conference, knowing the Big Ten is going to be down schedule-wise and team-wise, performance-wise, the Wolverines did this to themselves.
Yep. All right, we have the Clemson Tigers at number 4, sitting there at 8-0. Stephen Willis, your thoughts on the Clemson Tigers?
Clemson it strikes me a little bit seeing them in that 4 position. They remind me a little bit of that Baylor and TCU competition that happened back in 2014. I just don't know if they're going to be there in the end. So it feels like somebody's going to rise up and get them. I just am not impressed with Clemson. Obviously, they're 8-0, and they have some decent wins, but they benched DJ this past weekend and started playing the freshman and was able to win the game. I don't know if anybody in the ACC can beat them, but I'm just not impressed.
Yeah, I'm there with you. All right, Kane, you look at the 3 spots left. Does Tennessee deserve a spot over Georgia as we wait for ESPN to Georgia is number 3. So Tennessee will be either number 1 or number 2 ahead of the Georgia Bulldogs, which of course is huge because of this weekend.
Yeah, it's massive. Again, I think Tennessee, coming into this, deserves to be the number 1 team in the country. Seeing Alabama get that 6th spot, seeing LSU get that 10th spot, it kind of gave you even more, assurance that Tennessee might be up there and getting that 1 spot. Okay, beating 2 top 10 teams in the college football playoff ranking. So you got Georgia at 3. I now expect Ohio State to be at 2 and Tennessee at 1. We'll see what happens. Shout out Adam Collins, videography here in Knoxville. Go give him a follow. He's over here in the comment section. A lot of Vols in this comment section over here. I like it.
Yeah, then you got Brandon Olson, Locked On Gators host, wondering where Florida is and all this, which is funny. All right,
I can't find him either, Brandon. I don't know.
Yeah, they must have skipped over him. Ohio State is number 2, Jay Stevens, which of course means Tennessee is number 1. Eric, I know you've got to run in a second. Give us your thoughts now that it's official. Tennessee, the number 1 team in college football right now.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, right? I mean, look at where this team was. Look at where this program was, less than 2 years ago, about 19, 20 months ago. I mean, it's truly remarkable where it is, and it just goes to show you get a coach that knows what he's doing. You pair him with a quarterback that's got a high ceiling, and the rest is kind of history. So it's a good start for Tennessee. Obviously, a massive, massive test in front of them Saturday at Georgia to find out exactly are they worthy of that number 1 ranking. But right now, again, with the first installments, with the resume, the strength of schedule, the five ranked wins, nobody was more deserving. Tennessee, I think that's about right. So we'll see what happens, but everybody here in Knoxville is looking forward to Saturday for sure.
And Jay, of course, you nailed it. Eric, you've got a hop. Thank you for joining us on this Locked On College Football Rankings Reaction Show brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Jay Stevens, the number 2, you nailed it. The Ohio State Buckeyes. And you just look at where Ohio State is and you look at where Michigan is and that inevitable clash that will happen at the end of the season. Is that just kind of where this rivalry is right now?
Yeah, I believe it is, and I believe it's in a good, healthy spot. You want these 2 teams, know where they're going to play Thanksgiving weekend, the week prior to the Big Ten championship. This is also going to be a chance to win the division, the Big Ten East. So much riding on the line. You add in the history of the rivalry, the history of just what happened last year ago when Harbaugh and the Wolverines won that game and Ohio State got embarrassed. So there's so much on the line. Number 2 spot, all they have to do is do their job. I will say this, though, Zach. If Ohio State didn't play Notre Dame week 1 and they had a weaker non-conference, maybe not as weak as the Wolverines, but a weaker non-conference slate, I would easily see the committee putting Ohio State 3, Georgia 2 based off the schedule. That game week 1 against the then number 5 team, Notre Dame Fighting Irish, that really, I think, is what propelled the Buckeyes into being in the number 2 spot.
Well, do you think it's a little inconsistent? And Spencer, I'll open this question up to you as well. Just because Georgia's quality win right now is over an Oregon team that looks really good. And as Spencer alluded to earlier, they absolutely crushed them. I mean, is that a better win right now? Should maybe Georgia have gotten the edge because of that reason?
I don't know how you could look at where those 2 teams are right now and say that the win over Notre Dame is better than the win over Oregon. And,
Sure.
And this goes back to something we touched on earlier, and I thought about it when you said LSU was in there at number 10, right? With 2 losses. Recency bias is very, very real. And so that Georgia game feels like it was a long time ago. And one argument that is working, I think, in favor of Oregon here and could going forward and against Georgia is, well, that wasn't the same Oregon team as what they are right now. This is a better version of Oregon, which they are, but it's not as if Georgia isn't still very, very good. I mean, most good teams could have played Oregon in that week 1, and the Ducks hadn't quite figured things out. And it was the first time Kenny Dillingham was calling plays in a college football game, like the first time he's ever done that. And he's doing it against Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. And so now what you see is LSU has a loss on their resume to Florida State, a middling Florida State team, right, in the very weak ACC. But that's not counting against LSU, but it's more about the win they just had, I believe it's 2 weeks ago, against Ole Miss, right? That is clearly counting more in what the College Football Playoff Committee is saying here than what happened early in the season, though it's obviously still a consideration. But with that in mind, I cannot believe that Clemson is in there at number 4. That's just, I guess, an institutional level of respect for Dabo Swinney, which, look, maybe he's earned that with 2 national championships. It's certainly not a feat many can say that they've accomplished, but I just don't think Clemson passes the eye test compared to Michigan. Both have got a weak schedule, but who's got the best win on there? Don't tell me it's Clemson. Don't tell me that scraping by Wake Forest, who just got trounced by Louisville, or beating NC State, who barely beat a bad Virginia Tech team. Don't tell me that those wins are better than what Michigan did to Penn State, who I think is a good football team. I won't be surprised if Penn State, I haven't glanced at their schedule, that could be a 10-2 team by the end of the year. And I'm sure Jay can attest to the fact that that is a good football team, that Ohio State had a sequence of events go their way, and then they pulled away, and it looked like it wasn't as close as the final, or as the game actually was. And Michigan drubbed Penn State at home. So they've got the best individual win there. I'm surprised that Clemson is in over Michigan. I think the Wolverines are a better team. I do not believe in this Clemson team.
Who's too high? Who's too low? We'll touch on that in just a moment right here on the Locked On College Football Reaction Show. Fall is in the air, and that means fall grilling, tailgate parties, and so much more. Now is the perfect time to stock up on this incredible flavor and take advantage of 50% off site-wide by shopping the Omaha Steaks Friends and Family Sale. Go to omahasteaks.com. Use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout to get $30 off your order. Visit omahasteaks.com. Promo code LOCKEDON, all one word, LOCKEDON at checkout. Minimum order may be required. All right, folks, I want to go through this top 25 again. As you can see, the top 6 here: Tennessee at 1, Ohio State at 2, Georgia at 3, Clemson at 4. I think we all agree Clemson is probably the biggest question mark here, with Michigan and Alabama at 5 and 6 respectively. Does anybody here believe that in a head-to-head situation, Clemson would beat Michigan or Clemson would beat Alabama?
No,
not even a little bit.
Yeah, no one's speaking out on that one. So we'll see. I think that'll be interesting moving forward. And so then looking at it just 1 to 25 here, TCU at 7. Let's round out the top 10. TCU at 7, Oregon at 8, USC at 9, and LSU at 10. Do any of these teams in the top 10 not belong in the top 10 in anyone's mind here?
I'm surprised LSU is in there. Not because they aren't playing good football, but I don't think you should be able to get into the top 10 with 2 losses, one of them being to that pretty average Florida State team in the ACC, until you beat Alabama. Then you can be a 2-loss team in the top 10, in my view, but I don't think LSU should be there. And it's always this delicate balance when you're talking about college football rankings, right? Between who's your best win against and how are you playing recently and who'd you lose to, and eye test versus resume. And both have to be factored into these rankings, and you'd like to think that they are. But to me, that's an eye test. That's solely an eye test ranking there by the committee, putting LSU at number 10. And I think they're disregarding the resume just a little bit too much of the Tigers.
Well, Luke, how much do you think that number 10 ranking for LSU is, hey, they play Alabama this week, let's make this a little juicy?
Yeah, that was going to be my theory until they put Ohio State at 2. And the more I think about it, I agree with Jay that I thought they were going to put Ohio State there.
Sure.
But the more I think about it, I looked at the 2 schedules. If you look at the 2 schedules, the only 2 that neither team has played a lot of great competition outside of maybe one team, being Penn State for Ohio State and, of course, Oregon for Georgia. And Georgia buried them. Georgia just beat their brains in.
Yeah,
sure.
And I would give Georgia the benefit of the doubt for that. I'm a believer in the eye test. But if you're telling me Georgia and Ohio State play tomorrow, my eyes tell me, okay, Ohio State should be able to move the ball pretty easily. But my heart also tells me, hey, Georgia always finds a way. And they've been finding a way for the last couple of years. So I would put Georgia at 2. I think that's where they deserve it. And I think they missed a golden opportunity to have a 1 versus 2 matchup this weekend.
Yeah. Steven, looking at this and where they put LSU, does that kind of make that LSU Ole Miss game a little bit more of a, man, that one got away?
A little bit. That was a bad fourth quarter. I mean, Zach Evans did not play in that game. We were out 2 defensive players, but LSU gets credit for that win. That was obviously a head-to-head move the committee thing did. Now, I'm going back to Clemson still. The only reason I think Clemson is in the top 4 is an optics thing, because they didn't want two Big Ten teams and 2 SEC teams, or 3 SEC teams and 1 Big Ten team. I think they were trying to do this and saying, hey, everybody is being included. And this is just horrible. I'm sorry.
Let me chime in there just for a second, because I want to say this. See, I go back to Michigan's non-conference slate being just abysmal. It's not bad. It's disgusting. And it's sad that their athletic department let that happen, honestly. And so I don't mind giving Clemson the benefit of the doubt. Frankly, I think if we're going strictly on resume, TCU should probably be ahead of both of them. But they're not, and we get that. We're fine with it because we know historically Michigan and Clemson have been better. So we understand that, and it will work itself out. But, you said earlier, do you think Clemson would beat Alabama or Michigan? I don't think they would beat Alabama. I know I'm a homer again. I think they would certainly give Michigan a pretty doggone good fight. I mean, Michigan's not dynamic. And again, Michigan doesn't have anything on its resume outside of a pounding of a Penn State team that may not be that good. We saw Sean Clifford just collapse on himself like a dying star in that Ohio State game.
Which that's Sean Clifford's thing, right? Where it's like, is he actually good? Like, I don't know. I feel like we've been talking about Sean Clifford for like 10 years now at this point. Staying with the top 10, Oregon at 8, USC at 9. I think the AP poll has those flipped, Spencer. Do you think Oregon should be above USC as far as the tiers of teams in the Pac-12 right now?
Last I looked, Oregon was 8 in the AP poll and USC was at 9. I think it's right, because what you're looking at right now are 2 teams that have got 1 loss, and Oregon has the worst loss, but Oregon has the best win. And USC, if they were undefeated, might very well be in the top 5, in the top 4. If they had a road win against Utah and they had that 0 in the loss column, I think the college football playoff and just general college football media landscape's desire to get USC back to relevance would propel them there. And it'd be warranted. They've been very good this year. Their defense is pretty suspect. They've allowed 80 points in their last 2 games. One of those was to Utah on the road, but this past week they were at Arizona, and Arizona's done a nice job to get the rebuild underway. But if you're USC, you shouldn't allow 37 points to Arizona. I mean, it was not a good defensive showing, but their offense was really good without some of their best players. So I think that's why you've got Oregon there, is Oregon beat UCLA convincingly, and then USC a slot behind. I mean, it's going to come down to whether or not USC can beat UCLA on the road later this year. That's the biggest game in the Pac-12 that everyone has circled from a national implications standpoint. Within the conference, Oregon State at Washington this week is a really, really good game. I know you guys probably don't pay too much attention to it and such. It's big for both of those programs. Beavs in the top 25 here. I'm glad they've gotten that sort of respect, because Jonathan Smith has done a really, really good job with that program. And I also have to shout out Tulane out of the American. A buddy of mine does a lot of their TV play-by-play, and he carries goodwill and good fortune with him as an announcer wherever he goes. But I think when you look at Oregon and USC, that's the best matchup you could ask for in the Pac-12 championship game, because Oregon's already played UCLA. They've already played Utah, or they will play Utah, rather, in a couple weeks. If you're George Kliavkoff, you want to put your best product on the field, you want Oregon and USC. Those are your biggest brands. They're probably your 2 best overall teams as well, though I still think UCLA is very good, but definitely the biggest brands there.
Something that surprises me, doesn't surprise me, I do think it's interesting, is a lot of people have written off the Pac-12, right? But when you look at this, Oregon at 8, USC at 9, UCLA at 12, Utah at 14, there's a lot of potential for quality wins on all of these teams' schedules. Do you think the Pac-12 will have representation in the college football playoff when it's all said and done? I'd love everybody's answer with this. We'll start with Spencer since he hosts Locked On Pac-12, but I'd love to hear everybody's answer on this.
They could. It's not out of the realm of possibility. In the same in the same sense that Oregon needs help, any Pac-12 team would need some help. But you look at these rankings, and it's in a really good place. You've got 5 teams inside the top 25. And they're all probably going to win this week, except for maybe Oregon State, who's on the road at Washington. But if Washington wins that game, then the Huskies will be in the top 25 because they'll be 7-2. So you're looking at a conference that has almost half of its teams ranked. And the ones that are on the outside of the top 25 looking in are not slouches the way they have been in past years. Now, because those teams at the top have been playing so well and I think are so good, it's hard to see some upsets taking place. Like normally, Utah at Arizona, that might be an upset alert. But this is Utah hosting Arizona in Salt Lake City. And the way the schedules have worked out, a lot of those teams' tough games have already gotten out of the way, except for Oregon, who's still got, after Colorado this week, who's just dreadful. They've got Washington, then Utah, then Oregon State, and that's a tough end to the season by Pac-12 standards. But the idea that the Pac-12's out of the playoff, I don't buy that whatsoever. Like, would you need help? Yeah, but as we said, help is often given to those who do what they need to do and control what they can control in this wonderful sport of college football.
Yeah, I want y'all three's answer too. A bit shorter, if you don't mind. We're running out of time here. Steven, do you think the Pac-12 with all these? No, you're good, buddy. You host Locked On Pac-12. It's awesome. Steven, your thoughts on the Pac-12's representation in the playoff at the end of the year?
I think it's possible. It definitely is possible. They need some help to get there, but that's what these rankings are going to provide over the next 4 weeks. And you could see somebody even like UCLA make a move from the north side of ranked 10th, somebody like that. But the Pac-12 has a chance. It might be a reason like one SEC, one ACC. It could be just a weird thing where representation is so scarce and all the conferences are in there and all the people that want a 14 playoff are like, see, I told you so.
Right. No, this is a great year to make that case. Certainly. Luke, I don't think the Pac-12 will find a way into the college football playoff. What do you think?
No, I don't think so either. The only way I think it could happen, they need to be Georgia fools. I mean, they need to be pulling for Georgia like they live in Athens, because they need that team to look as good as it can, because even if it's not Oregon, they want to be the team that beat Oregon too, along with Georgia, so Georgia looks even better. Yeah. And I'm going to go back just for a second. I know I feel like I'm harping on this. Why in the world wouldn't you put Georgia number 2 when you can avoid all this controversy? Because next week you're going to bump Ohio State up at least to 2 when one of those 2 teams loses. That makes the most sense to me, because now I think they're in a bit of a quandary, because if Tennessee loses, if Georgia beats Tennessee, you have to put Georgia at 1 now, right? Ohio State's not going to move. And then guess what that's going to do? Make everybody at Ohio mad.
Jay, your thoughts on that?
I was going to touch on the original topic about the Pac-12.
You can talk. Yeah, no, you can talk about the Pac-12 if you want. Sure.
Yeah,
Pac-12 in the college football playoff at the end of the year.
It's possible, but it's a slim chance that it happens. Georgia, Tennessee, somebody's going to lose this weekend, but I still think one of those 2 teams will be top 6 after that matchup. Ohio State, Michigan, they play the final week of the regular season. One of them will probably win the Big Ten championship game. I still don't see one of them teams, even after that loss, moving outside of the top 5. And so it's really tricky. Winning in November, games in November are really, really important to the final rankings. It's possible, but there's a really slim chance that it happens.
All right, guys. I want to get y'all's thoughts. Okay, we've really talked about 1 through 10 a ton. As far as 11 through 25, who do you like the most? As far as, okay, maybe they've got an outside shot to really, really make some noise down the stretch. Steve, I know we've talked about Ole Miss a little bit. Penn State's been mentioned. Outside of those teams, who do you guys like in this scenario as far as making a push? I'm not saying maybe they make the Final Four or anything like that, but have a chance to really be a solid top 10 team by the end of the year. Anybody got any folks that they want to call out here?
Oh, I got one.
Go ahead.
I'm going to the John Daly of college football, baby. Brett Bielema. He can play. He plays
top
Michigan.
10? Illinois top 10?
Why not? Look at their remaining schedule. It is a dump truck. I mean, it is nothing. It's Michigan State, who's got 8 suspended players right now. Then
Okay.
Purdue. Purdue is never good this time of year. Then they're at Michigan. That's all they have left until they're at Northwestern. So that at Michigan game is the week before Michigan, Ohio State. And they might catch Michigan at a great time. Yeah, they're at Michigan, but still, I mean, this Illinois team ought to be pretty well rested. I mean, they haven't played a very daunting slate. And like I said, they've got 2 what I would call sort of dented soup cans until they get to Michigan. They can spend a lot of time preparing. And as I said, Brett Bielema can lull you to sleep. And the next thing you know, you've lost 11-9.
All right. Who else has a team that can make a late surge and finishes a strong top 10 team?
UCLA. I'm going to stick with the Pac-12 there, Zach, because
you're so predictable.
Looking at UCLA, I know. But think about it. They've got USC at home this year, a team that they beat handily a year ago. It's a very different USC team for sure, but I don't think USC's defense is going to be able to stop that Bruins offense very easily. And so the case for UCLA is if they can beat USC and win the rest of their games, get into the Pac-12 championship game and play Oregon, who look like they're probably going to be in that position, then what you have for UCLA is an opportunity to do what Oregon did when they made the college football playoff in 2014, and that's have one conference loss to a good Pac-12 opponent in the regular season and then get revenge against them in the conference championship game. Oregon lost to Arizona at home in 2014. Now, Oregon's schedule that year was certainly tougher than what UCLA had in their non-conference because they were going to play Michigan, and then that fell through and whatnot. But UCLA, the way they've been beating teams has been solid since conference play began. If Washington ends up as a 9-win team by the end of the year, that would help them a lot. And then UCLA would have a win against USC. They would have a redemption win against Oregon, the team that beat them, a team they lost to on the road. I mean, you're sitting there at 12-1 or 11-1 going into the conference championship game. I think they would be right there in that conversation. So I'll take the Bruins out of that crowd.
Okay. All right, Steven, Jay, one of you guys want to throw me kind of a wild card to watch down the stretch here?
Go ahead.
I'm actually going to take the one SEC team that I secretly root for every year. Doesn't get on Twitter.
Auburn's not on there.
I know. You guys don't have the coach either, so I'm not on that train right now. It is Ole Miss. I understand they play Alabama here coming up in a couple weeks. I am a person that I know it's going to be a tough task, but I would love, and I might send some Ole Miss tweets that day. I would love to see that game be an Alabama win. Luke would lose his mind, but I think that if that happens, Ole Miss will be in the top 10 at the end of the year.
If Ole Miss wins that one, sure.
Yeah.
No, I think certainly that'd be the case. Yeah. Steven, Jay stole your team, so give us kind of a team to watch.
I think people should watch Tulane, honestly. They have a chance to go to an NY6 bowl game. Decent team. They let one get away against Southern Mississippi, or else they'll be 8-0 right now. And the Green Wave, it's always good when Tulane is competitive, and it's just really fun to see a number by their name. So roll Wave.
I like that. I'm surprised no one said Syracuse. I've been really impressed when I've watched them so far, 6-2 on the season. And I think their tough part of the schedule is behind them. So not that anyone asked, but I'll say Syracuse in all of this. Pittsburgh, winnable. Florida State, winnable. At number 20, Wake Forest. I think that's going to be an interesting matchup. Then Boston College as well. So, I think that's going to be a team that I'm looking at right now. Syracuse has impressed me.
Syracuse loses to Pitt on Saturday.
Well, and somebody chimed in on the comments, North Carolina, and I love me some Drake May. I mean, that guy was one time committed to Alabama, but he's got so much North Carolina in his blood, it just wasn't going to happen. And, man, I love watching that kid play. I think he's incredibly dynamic.
All right, we're getting called out for the anti-Michigan bias here. Do you guys think that's fair? Or do you think, Michigan still, they could be good. They just haven't really been given the opportunity yet. And they'll play some teams down the stretch here.
Zach, as another school that is constantly bombarded with a weak non-conference schedule, I can understand. I think Ole Miss got punished a little bit in these rankings because of that weak schedule.
Sure.
And that's the reason they're 8-1. I think Michigan, everybody is kind of taking a wait and see look. Like I said, Clemson being up there, that's an abomination. That just shouldn't happen. But I think they are being punished for that non-conference schedule.
The committee has been extremely consistent ever since the beginning of the college football playoff era, where they will reward tough non-conference schedules. Even when you lose some of these, they don't hold a quality loss against you. It's been that way since this all started several years ago. And so I think you nailed it, Stephen. And so that hurts Michigan. And I think as the conference expands, you're going to see more and more big non-con matchups, which is going to be awesome. We all win in that scenario. But yeah, I think that's why they're not a top 4 team right now. I think it makes sense.
And they really can't help themselves until the last 2 weeks of the year. Like I mentioned, they want Illinois to keep winning because they'll play Illinois, then Ohio State, who will probably be undefeated. If Michigan wins those 2 games, they'll probably end up being the number 2 seed in the playoff.
Yeah, any team that's in the top 10, with the exception of the Pac-12 teams, and we touched on this a second ago, if they win out, they're good. If they win out, they're going to be okay. But it's just, you got to take care of your own business. Hey, folks, thank you for tuning into the Locked On College Football Rankings Reaction Show. If you're tuning in and you're not subscribed to Locked On SEC, be sure to do that. Thank you to Stephen Willis, Locked On Ole Miss, Luke Robinson, Locked On Bama, Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On Ducks, and Locked On Pac-12, and Jay Stevens, Locked On Buckeyes. For the Locked On Podcast Network, I'm Zach Blackerby. Thanks for tuning in.